Hello YouTube. This is the continuation of the series of the wood stain rifle stock refinish with a water-based product on the M9130 Mosin-Nagant Tula Arsenal 1943 production year. And this is what I ended up getting after basically treating this with Truoil. There's the handguard. So it does have a nice little reddish brown tint to it. Remember from my other videos that I did mention that I did use the RIT dye in using scarlet red as the base coat, followed by cherry red and so on, and eventually finished again with with the scarlet red. And I do apologize, I do have the brass fittings here covered in plastic because as I was coating with Truoil, I was trying to protect them. But I'm quite pleased with the end result. You can see it's got a very nice gloss to it, some detail to the wood, the grain. Some of the spots I was not able to clean up like this. Those were pretty much permanent stains that I couldn't get rid of even with steaming. Some of the cartouche markings you can see right there in the shine. Let me go ahead and again, I'm doing this one-handed. But you can see the markings are here. There's like a number 14. I'm not sure if the camera will pick that up. And there was another Cyrillic character somewhere back here. Here's another cartouche marking. Now, on this example here, this knot, the Truoil, no matter how much I coated it, it didn't. I actually ended up finishing up with 9 coats of oil. I was going to go to 10, but decided not to. But as you can see, the grain detail is there. The underside looks very nice. The finish, I do have a couple of spots where it did run. Unfortunately, it was a little bit thick. But overall, I'm quite pleased with the end result. This is essentially the colors that I was trying to accomplish. And even the stock repair kind of still more or less blended in. As far as the end cap here, I went ahead and put 2 quick layers of Truoil. Now on this stock, I did use the finger method on this. However, the first 2 layers were not very good. I treated the end cap or the buttstock here a little bit, and you can see how there's some spots where it didn't really completely seal. But again, the idea is to treat it. Going back to the base coat, I ended up putting 2 layers of the Truoil down by hand. Okay, but it seemed like the stock did not want to take very well. It would not absorb it, even though it had been sanded down with 220 grit. I had done my treatment of the staining with the dye, came back with 400 grit, pretty much knocked off most of the remaining stain. But what it did was it submerged the stain into the wood, so it absorbed it after a couple of days of treatment. And in essence, what happened is once you put the Truoil in it, by the 3rd and 4th coat, it was really bringing out the detail of the grain. Okay, so that just kind of shows you what Truoil can really do. Because again, you're putting linseed back in it. We basically sucked out pretty much any or all the oils out of it, including some of the cosmoline that was embedded here in the stock. Of course, I used citrus strip in that process. But I went down to the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th layers with a foam brush. Now, the only thing about the foam brush, it also has its limitations, is that even though you do long strokes like this, you pretty much may start, like, for example, here and work your way back. You're probably, by the time you get to here, you've run out of product, depending on the stock. So I had to basically continue to reapply in sections and then kind of carry it out in a final stroke to get there. Now here, as you can see, some of the strokes weren't very, very successful. I did roughen up the surface in between the applications of Truoil with 4/0 steel wool, which is very fine steel wool. However, you have to be really, really careful when you do this process, very lightly, because you still end up removing some of the Truoil. Even though I was allowing anywhere from 2 to 4 hours in between applications, the thing about it was I was still also applying the tack cloth to clean up that, any debris. And you still had a couple of spots. So one of the things I had to keep going back over and then checking and then rechecking. And as you can see, here's a good example of where there's some errors where I have a little bit of the stain still left embedded now in the stock. And of course, it still brought out the detail, but you have some spots. So some people would call it blotching or irregularities. Needless to say, you know, again, it's something. So if you're going to consider using Truoil, just keep that thought in mind. The 2-finger method, or the finger method as they call it, doing it this way, it generally takes anywhere from 2 to 4 hours to dry. Most people would say 3 to 4 hours. I would say you be real careful on the first 2 layers. You may want to lay it down thick and then make sure you spread it. Now, there's several people on YouTube that describe on using, like on musical instruments, which actually have a larger surface area, to use to basically lay it down, run it both ways with the grain to absorb, and then basically remove the excess and then allow it to dry. Which, again, depending on the conditions, because the Truoil that I was dealing with, no matter how much I shook it up and controlled the use of it, it would start tacking up relatively quickly because it has been unusually warm here. And so you have to allow a little bit of time for reaction. So you may want to kind of work like this. We'll cover that area completely before carrying that area, the leftovers, and carrying it out, and being careful in the equal distribution. But overall, I'm quite pleased. You can see the grain detail there. You still got a nice shine. Yes, I do want to have a high gloss. I'm still planning to go ahead and use a polishing paste on here, being real careful with it, of course, and then basically putting some wax. I do have some Murphy's wax, which you can get a little tin about yay big for roughly about $5 or $6. You can also use that wax, especially not only on wood stocks of all types, but you can also use it in metal to help preserve, because it's got a little bit of agents in it to conserve metal. So I will go back, but I still have to go back on spots like this. I gotta go back and just kind of touch it up and refinish it. I didn't tape this. You can always tape these. It's very hard to get these off the recoil lugs and put them back on for some rifles. A lot of people just say leave them. I didn't tape them. But again, as you start going the different methods, you may want to tape that, like I did here, the handguards. I will continue the process because I still want to try to do some other things. I want to show the rifle complete, but I just wanted to provide you an update on this. I hope you're pleased with the results. I know I am. And again, I just want to try to make it about as nice as possible for my own goods, and still at the same time preserve history, and as always, keep shooting your Mosins. If you have any other questions or concerns regarding this, please feel free to leave a comment. I hope this video has been helpful in what you can accomplish with the Mosin. Definitely explore your options on YouTube. A lot of people have different insight and different ways of doing it. I just try to be about as descriptive as I could, but definitely tack cloth, steel wool. If you're going to be using sandpaper to try to level this out, some of the other professionals that do woodwork basically do recommend, once you pass a couple of layers and you're going to start getting to the point where you're going to end up sanding the stock, even though you have layers of Truoil and so on, you may want to consider exploring the 1,000 to 1,500 grit type of sandpaper and wet sand, and then dry the stock before you apply another layer of Truoil or even stain. In some cases now, once you start wet sanding, because you're doing water-based, it will lift the color. So oil-based stain, that would be a different approach, but again, you try to avoid water and oil, because again, you'll have some negative results. It'll actually raise not only the wood, but the stain itself will look all blotchy and looks like you're trying to do water repelling on the stock. So thank you for watching, and please continue to stay tuned. Have a great day.